Every 3 minutes, a person in the U.S. is diagnosed with a blood cancer like leukemia, lymphoma, or myeloma, blood cancers that often require patients to endure difficult treatments that leave them feeling weak, cold, and isolated. Subaru of Gwinnett is here to help. Since 2016, Subaru has partnered with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, a cause that FAN has been proud to support for over 24 years. And in the month of June, through our Subaru Loves to Care initiative, we're continuing our partnership with LLS to give even more to patients and their families. Subaru, more than a car company. Visit SubaruofGwinnett.com to learn more.
This younger generation, they're more activist, which when it's like climate change, we love it. But like when you're like the intern and you're sending an email to the CEO going, I don't think that you, there's other ways to do that. It starts with empathy. And we have to understand for better or for worse, the changing nature of what work has become in our lives. If you go back a bunch of decades, it used to be that you got your sense of purpose from church, you got your sense of community from bowling league, you knew your neighbors, you barbecued with them on the weekends, and work, I was loyal to work and work was loyal to me. At some point I'd get a gold watch. Aside, there's an entire generation that when I talk about the gold watch, they have no idea what I'm talking about, right? That's how much the world has changed. And work was simply a place that I made a living to pay my bills. But I still enjoyed it was still loyalty. Over the course of time, church attendance is down, bowling clubs don't exist anymore, we don't talk to our neighbors, we become very insular. And what's happened is all of that pressure is now being put on the office. I now expect my company to be the place where I get my purpose, the place I get my friendships, the place I get my community, the place I get my social life. Now we've also added the place you have to agree with all of my politics. Right? That's a new one. And it's even now, especially during COVID, it's gone up even higher, especially for this young group, where you also have to be my therapists, my therapy. I'm going to bring all of my problems to work. And where the idea of emotional professionalism seems to have gone away. Where you actually see people sitting in meetings like this, and you're like, what's going on? Having a bad day, right? That's emotionally unprofessional. Right? I want you to bring your emotions to work. I want you to bring...
Well, welcome to the Janelle King Show. I am Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3. And this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. I was thinking back at my first date that I had with my husband, Kelvin, and it was at a baseball game. We love baseball, as some people may know, but that was our first date. He took me to a game, and we hung out. We had a great time. We were together ever since. And now we use our baseball times as an opportunity to have our date nights, because our schedules are so sporadic. So it's virtually impossible for us to schedule a standing date night like some people do, which I think is great. So for us, we pick one game out of every series and we go, and that's our date night. So it's really sporadic. So sometimes we have date night on Tuesday night, sometimes on a Friday night. It just depends on what we can get in and how we can fit it in. But we make sure that we establish that upfront to ensure we have a strong marriage or a strong relationship. So we're really, really serious about that. So that works perfectly for us to have those scheduled date nights. But because of our sporadic schedule, like I said, we fall in various different days of the week. So it just so happens that our date night came up. And the other night, I was on our date, and I noticed something. That was happening, a little trend that I was interested in kind of digging a little bit deeper on. And oftentimes this happens while we are together doing stuff that has nothing to do with politics, have nothing to do with what we do for work. It's literally just us hanging out, having a good time. So the other night we were at a baseball game, and we happened to be in the Delta Club, and we were walking around. I was looking, and I noticed that there were several young women who were wearing a very similar outfit, I guess you can say, or look. It was an oversized shirt or jersey, short denim shorts, either a tank top that was kind of tight or a little revealing, and a crop top. And it was literally, that showed the midsection, and it was literally almost every young girl that I saw had this exact thing on. It wasn't just one or two, it was more like 5 or 10. And that's just what I could see from my vantage point. I'm assuming if I had walked around outside of the club, more so in the area where most people are, I probably would have seen a lot more, but this is just what I saw in the club from my vantage point. And I immediately thought, this is the power of Pinterest. Pinterest is a social media platform that I happen to use as well, but I said, this is the power of Pinterest. So if you don't know what I mean, or you didn't know what of Pinterest, it's a social media platform that is all about discovering and sharing ideas, inspiration, information, mainly through images and videos. In other words, it's a personal digital bulletin board, according to their own words, where users can create and manage personalized collections of their own information, their own ideas, their own stuff, and they call it these boards. So we all get a board, and we can pin visual content, meaning if I'm searching through and I see something I really, really like, I can hit save to this board or pin to this board, and I can now save it, and I'm creating this board of visuals. Whether it's images, infographics, videos, whatever I'm covering at that time, everything from fashion, home decor, recipes, travel, everything can be put on these boards. For me personally, I often use it as fashion inspiration, such as searching things like rainy day, business casual looks for women is something that I've searched. I do a lot of like rainy day outfits because I get confused sometimes. I'm like, I don't know what I want to wear. So I look and I just look at different looks, and it gives me some inspiration. I go in my closet and I'm like, oh, let me throw that together. So I do that a lot. So there's a little bit of a fashion tip that I recommend to you ladies. However, and guys, but even though Kelvin doesn't have a Pinterest and I don't think he wants one, but either way, there are some guys that have Pinterest. That being said, what I thought was, I said, these young girls must have all searched cute baseball outfits. And sure enough, they did. Once I searched and I saw where it says cute baseball outfits, the look that I saw in that club amongst those young girls was a look that I saw happening or I saw in those images. So I wasn't surprised at all. It looks like everyone was wearing it just like how it was presented on Pinterest. And it really made me think about something. It made me think about the influence that social media platforms have on our young people and how technology in these forms are so engraved in the fabric of particularly our Generation Z life. Now, not just Z, we have Generation Y, which is also known as your millennials, which is what the generation I'm a part of. But so I'm going to kind of merge the two. But at the time, I realized that social media was something that was really, really big. It was really engraved in our Gen Zers' life, literally from birth. So how does this play in the overall bigger picture? Well, the experience I had at the baseball game sent me on this rabbit trail that I thought was worth noting. And I ended up turning it into a podcast because I think it's extremely important that we talk about this. Our world is changing, but it has always been changing. Today, what we call retro and what we call vintage are clothing or clothes from the 70s. Meaning if you look at the 70s as vintage, that means the year my husband was born, he was born in 1974, that is now considered vintage, okay? And my husband's 50, so that's not that long ago. However, this is how fast, this is the speed at which our social media is definitely growing and our technology is innovating and it's just growing. So that just shows you that mostly the speed at which innovation is moving. So why am I talking about this? Because we have an election approaching, and if we're not marketing to voters who are, if we're only marketing to voters who are over 50 and we're not looking at those who are under 50, then we're certainly missing the mark. If we think that Gen Zers and Millennials care about the same issues as the baby boomers or the older generation care about, then you're also in for a rude awakening come November 2024. Fear cannot drive the discussion any longer. In this climate, it's going to take a degree of understanding and acceptance that the world as we know it is changing. The 1950s is gone, and the idea that it is somehow just around the corner is a fallacy. The idea that we can go back to those days is a fallacy. As a millennial, I find myself in this extremely important space. I will be 40 this year. So I am also on the older side of the discussion because I'm considered to be on the older end of the millennial population. But I'm also kind of sort of on the younger side when it comes to the baby boomers and the Gen Xers. So I'm a little bit in that middle space. And that's why I think it's important to really look at this and why it's something I think that is pressing to me. So technically, my generation, all of us that are caught right there in the middle, we will be considered to be the Zennials. Zennials are like your millennial and Gen Xers that are kind of mixed, which is a blend between the two of them. It's determined based on whether or not you can remember when cell phones were not an everyday staple, or if you can remember when they have arrived. And I do. So I'm trapped in that middle. I remember grabbing the phone and having me on the phone and my mom picking up the phone and saying, get off the phone. You need it. It's too late. Get off the phone. On the other end, I remember all of that. But I also remember getting a cell phone as I was going into high school as well, so that my parents was like, hey, it's a new thing. You can have this phone, yada, yada. But I got it in high school. I didn't get it in middle school. I didn't get it in elementary school, which is where we're seeing it right now. I also remember the yellow pages. So another determinant of a Zennial is whether you can remember the yellow pages or not. And if you can remember having typing classes that did not include the internet, that's also an indicator. And I remember all that stuff. So that being said, I consider myself to be a little bit of a Zennial, which is why this topic is so interesting to me, because I can feel it on both ends. I can feel what's happening on both ends. So this gives me a very interesting perspective and places as it relates to, just understanding both sides of the argument. So if you think this election is going to be decided purely on issues, you are sadly mistaken. I wish that was the case. I am a strong advocate of pushing for issues and focusing on issues, but I have to be clear and be honest with you. I don't believe that this election is going to be purely focused on issues. Generation Z is comprised of young people ages 10 to 25 years old, individuals who are born between 1990 and 2010s. And then millennials are those ages 28 to 43 years old. These are millennials or Generation Y. These individuals were born between 1981 and 1996. So I was born in 1984. So that puts me on the I guess you could say the older end of the millennial spectrum. These generations combined make up 40% of the voting population. Like all generations, when they first stepped on the scene, they were considered, these generations combined make up about 40% of the voting population. So like all generations, when the millennials or when Gen Zers first stepped on the scene, they were uninterested in politics and still are in some cases. There are a lot of young people who are just like, have a lot of apathy. They're not there yet. But now they're growing up, particularly the millennials. We're starting to run into policy and how it can either affect us or help us. And things like trying to buy a home or trying to start a family or attempting to build a career in a life. These are all things that we're now stepping into, particularly millennials. And they're realizing that policy plays a huge role. And it causes them to wake up to policy and politics as a whole. And that's where we are. The millennial generation, we are one of the largest generations here. We have eclipsed the baby boomers. So that's something to take note of as well. So if you've been living under a rock and you haven't seen the impact of young voters, then you are, and how they are shaping our politics in this direction, in the direction of the country, I don't know where you are. So when you're part of the older generation and you've seen the world in one way for most of your life, or not your entire life, it's extremely difficult to look through the lens of the generation that's coming behind you, and a little more difficult to understand them. So after the break, we're going to go back to the baseball game, and I'm going to attempt to give you a glimpse into the world of this generation by peeking beyond the veil, starting with why it is so hard to find employees, specifically in industries that are traditionally held by young people. Then I'm going to take you down a little bit of a rabbit hole and lastly discuss what this means for our 2024 election, all that and more right here on the Janelle King Show. You're listening to the Janelle King Show. I am Janelle King. This is Extra 106.3, and we will be right back.
emotions to work. I want you to bring your whole self to work. But for the same reason that we exercise emotional professionalism in other aspects of our lives, we also do it at work. So one of the struggles of this young generation is they are not equipped on how to deal with stress. They're just less equipped than previous generations for various reasons, including social media, internet, and all and parenting and all the rest of it. There's many reasons for it, but they're really not good at dealing with stress. They're really bad at dealing with confrontation. They're so confrontation avoidant that they would rather ghost someone than break up with them after dating them for 6 months, right? That they would rather quit their job than ask their boss for a raise. And usually in spectacular fashion, like, you don't value me, you don't pay me enough, you're like, if you just asked, I would have given you a raise, and we love you. But they quit because they're just afraid of the conversation. So they're very intimidated by confrontation, they're ill-equipped to deal with stress, there's an emotional immaturity, emotional unprofessionalism, right? And it's not a good thing or a bad thing, it just is. And so us having empathy and understanding that is important. And so it raises the question, how are they dealing with their stress? Not well. And so there's a new phenomenon that I'm seeing happening in a lot of offices where, especially young people, are finding the one or two the empaths on the team, and they're going to them with all of their problems. And it's not the traditional, I hate my boss, I hate my job. Venting about work is fine, I have no issue with that. But it's, I hate my mom, I don't know what I want to do with my life, when am I going to leave my house, my boyfriend's not working out, my girlfriend's not working out, like every problem in my life on this one or two people at work. And we've had it happen on our team. We had 3 people quit. And I got a little team. I got 3 people who quit because they said they were burnt out. And I was like, I know how much work you.
Well, welcome back to the Janelle King Show. I am Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3. And this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary for a strong republic. So welcome back to the table. This show is dedicated to explaining why I believe that traditional political messaging is not going to be the winning message come this upcoming election in 2024, and that we all must pay attention. So if you missed the first half of the show, no worries. You can simply go to my YouTube page. You can watch the video podcast that is up right now, or you can catch an encore episode tomorrow at 9 a.m. Right here on Extra 106.3. And if you prefer to listen rather than watch, you can catch the replay of this episode that would drop on Tuesday, because we have podcasts that drop every single Tuesday. You can listen to it on the podcast part right here with Extra 106.3, or wherever you get your podcast. Just simply search The Janelle King Show. Now, let's get back to the table. Specifically the table right here at the Braves Stadium. So going back to the Braves game, because we're going back to my date night at the Braves game, and what I noticed about the young girls that were all wearing the same thing, and how I noticed that was probably deeply connected to Pinterest and being able to search what cute baseball outfits. And then we had all these girls coming there looking exactly the same, which is fine. I love Pinterest, no shade on them. However, I thought that was a really interesting idea, interesting concept. I thought that it showed the impact of social media, particularly on young people. So because I'm going to use another moment at the game, I want to give you a glimpse into the world of Gen Zers. So before we go a little bit in there, let me start with this. I want to give you this glimpse to break down why I believe we have to pay attention to our younger generation, and show you how I do think that there are some mistakes that are happening on our side as us that are closer to the older generation or older millennials. So as my husband and I found a table in the club and we were getting ready to sit down, one of the servers from the club reached over to us. They started cleaning the table, and we were grateful, and we were surprised to see her there, because she typically works on the weekends, on Saturday and Sunday, not on Friday, but just Saturday and Sundays. But this was a weekday night, and I was kind of surprised to see her there. So we asked her, man, you're here, why are you here on a weekday? You normally work on the weekends. And she said, well, we were short staffed today, so I was available. I decided to come in. My husband then asked her, so are they struggling to find people? Like, are y'all looking, is Braves and Delta, like, are they really, is it hard to find people to work? And she said, yes. She said there's not a lot of people that want to come into work. So then I looked at him and I said, where are they? Because how can anyone afford not to work during this economic climate? I mean, between food, gas, childcare, everything is high. So I didn't understand that. I'm like, how are young people surviving without working? And at least that's the question that popped in my mind. But then the answer kind of revealed itself to me as I began to think a little bit more. But then I realized that the answer has been in front of us the whole time and that it's really revealed itself, but I don't think we're looking at it because we're looking at it through the lens of our generation. It's been here all along, but we just didn't see it because it's so far outside of our personal norm. It's outside of what we know in our personal norm. The industries that are hurting the most are the service industries. These are your lower wage jobs that are typically held by young people. And when I was growing up, the normal first step was to take a job either at McDonald's or in some cases, or in my case, my first job was at Golden Corral, which I wasn't sure if that existed, but apparently it still does. It still does. I get it. Okay. But either way, that was my normal thing, right? Because there wasn't another alternative. And it was just kind of all we had. If you wanted to make some money, you had to go to work and you had to go to simply either fast food or some type of, lower wage job because you're just entering the workforce. But there lies our answer. What are these typical new jobs that our young people are entering into? Well, due to technology, young people today have created an entirely new industry, a lot of new industries, matter of fact. In most cases, it's not that they're not working or that they're sitting on their hands or that they're being lazy, but it's that they're working in industries that mostly baby boomers and some millennials, but definitely those baby boomers and older, have no clue that they exist. For example, let's just take what I'm doing right now, podcasting. Podcasting was not something that was prevalent in the 50s. I mean, there was radio, but it was totally different. Technology didn't allow you to podcast from the comfort of your own home or to podcast from anywhere on vacation or whatever you want to do by just utilizing your phone or your tablet. So that was not the case. But let's just look at podcasting. I'm currently sitting right now in my home recording this. I happen to have a station that supports the show and helps me to prepare this for radio, but I mostly do my own editing and then I send it over to them and they edit it based on whatever they need to do in order to get it prepared for the radio. And I do choose to edit myself because I like to be a part of all aspects of my work. If I'm starting something like this, I am a part of every aspect of it because before I start hiring someone, I need to know what I expect from them, what I think they can do, what I need to know what they should be doing, right? So just for me personally, I like to start slow. I like to work slow. I don't hire people. I just kind of build up so that I can be fully aware. But if I wanted to hire someone right now to assist me with my podcasting, let me list off the potential roles that I could hire people to assist me with. Co-hosting, producer, audio engineer, script writers and show writers, researcher, content strategy, social media manager, marketing and PR specialist, graphic designer, video editor, web developer, transcriptionist, advertising sales manager, community manager, distribution manager, data analyst, legal advisor, virtual assistant. Wow. And I could keep going. Many of these roles that I just listed off were not here within the last 10 years. Some of them were, but they were being utilized in one particularly dominating industry. But now there's another industry. And also 99% of what I just listed off can be done from your home. Get that? So there are a lot of people who just don't know that these roles exist. Not to mention that these two generations, the millennials as well as the Gen Zers, have utilized these from a very long time. There are a lot of people who don't know that these roles exist. Not to mention that these generations, the millennials and Gen Zers, as well. So there are a lot of people who just don't know that these roles exist. Not to mention that these generations, the millennials and the Gen Zers, have a much less affinity to punching a clock, at least on the terms of how we have in the past. Let's take me for example. As a millennial, I mean, I've been self-employed for over a decade now. So I can look back 10 years ago when I decided to go and start working for myself in some capacity, whatever it is. And I work just as hard, if not harder now or then and over the last decade than I did prior to waking up and going to a corporate job. But there have been many who may think that I'm lazy or that I was lazy because they didn't see me going to a corporate job, when in fact, I was working so hard. I may not have earned a W-2 at the end of the year, but I definitely was working extremely hard to push myself forward, to do things in the community. I was doing so much that at that time that it was really overwhelming, but I was working. So this understanding of new industries immediately caused me to think about whether or not we can sustain, whether or not these jobs are sustainable. And that's something that my husband said to me as we were talking about this at the table. I said, well, you have all these industries. It's not that these people are not working. It's just that maybe they're working other places. Not to say there aren't some that are, but maybe they're working somewhere else. So I said, so my husband says, well, is it sustainable? Can it keep up with inflation? Are they making enough money to really take care of themselves? So I can tell you that on my journey, it was such a grind, and it still is a grind. And working for yourself during the gig economy, which is what we had to do because I graduated right into a recession when I graduated from college, we all had to kind of learn how to kind of grind on our own and take care of ourselves. And it wasn't really profitable, and it still really isn't, but it's enough to be able to keep pushing something forward if you are trading off in other areas, or versus working in a corporation where you're getting this huge salary. So it does take a much longer time to see returns. But if you're an influencer or a tastemaker, then it can come a lot faster. What am I saying? Okay. So today, a good social media reel are those videos that you see where people are just kind of like, just kind of flashing through. But a good social media reel or a good social media post can take you from making nothing to bringing you into thousands of dollars within a short period of time, believe it or not. Couple that with the fact that you have 20% of millennials and approximately 50% of Gen Zers ages 21 to 27 who live with their parents or a family friend. Then it will all begin to make sense as to where our today's wage workers are hiding. So if you think about it, this is a big shift, right? And it can explain why we're seeing restaurants closing down, why we're seeing nightclubs closing down. Well, let's talk about that for a little bit. So approximately 75% of Gen Zers say that they are not club goers. So they're not going to these clubs that are specifically clubs where you sit and you buy bottles or you sit in a little section, kind of what we were doing as millennials in college and Gen Xers. They're not doing that anymore. In fact, they are now considering themselves to be bar hoppers. So no more high heels, no more club dresses and outfits, no more expensive cocktails and bottles, no more sections that need to be reserved and all this money you got to spend. They have traded all of that for sneakers and beer. And specifically, Gen Zers and millennials, because they were questioned about this phenomenon, and a millennial just was asking about that, and then they responded by saying that we're not going to clubs, because the millennial was asking girls, why are you not wearing high heels anymore? And they're like, we don't need to. We're not going to clubs anymore. We're going to bars. So you know what? Hey, I really can't be mad at them for the comfort. However, I do think there's something about wearing heels, and ladies, we can talk about that in another video. However, but I'm not mad that they're choosing comfort. I get that as well. So the fact remains that the world is changing, and it's going to continue to change. It's not something that's new. It's been changing for a very, very long time. I mean, catch this. We're not discussing widening the roads in order to accommodate horse and buggies, but there was a time when that was a huge political discussion. Can you imagine taking the talking points around widening roads for horses and buggies and talking about that now in 2024? You would be laughed at. More importantly, people will probably think that you need to be referred to the psych ward because you're clearly living all the way in the past. So why are we discussing or ignoring issues that are pertinent to these groups of voters right now? I'll tell you why. Because I believe that we are completely unaware of their concerns, or we think that they're not valid, or in some cases, we just dismiss them as emotional and uninformed. When the truth is that none of that matters. What matters is that they are voters and that they are planning to vote, and that they're going to vote based on what they see through their lens of their generation. So that means that if abortion is a key issue to this particular voting block, then we must become creative in how we shape our position. How do we explain our position? However, not having a position on this cannot be the option. It just can't be. Let's take the topic of climate change. For many of us in our generations, especially particularly those that are older, climate change has happened over the course of 6 and 7 decades, right? You've watched it take place over decades. But for these voters, that's not the case. They don't have history to look back towards. They can't look through the lens of history as so many of us can. And for them, the change, it looks very rapid. And so that causes them to have this emotional connection to this. So another issue is healthcare. I mean, we clearly don't want government healthcare, particularly if you have history and you can look through the lens of your generation and look back over some things. We can clearly see what happens when you remove competition out of healthcare, right, in any industry, and you start to rely on the government for your basic needs. We all know what happens with that. It leads to poor quality of service, slow returns on your results, less time with your doctor at visits, not because the medical professionals don't want to spend time with people or they don't want to do their job, but in most cases, it's just extremely hard to do so, particularly when you have 80 million people, if not more than that, but I know it's right around 80 million people who are on Medicaid, and we have just about 1.1 million physicians. 80 million people and 1.1 million physicians. And that's not including the percentage of physicians that are able to see Medicaid. I think they all will, but some don't. So when you have so few physicians, but so many that are utilizing this service, it's important to know that they cannot guarantee a high quality of service. You get poor quality of service, slow returns on results, less time with doctors and at your doctor visit, right around 10 minutes. So what I found is that most doctors can only see their patients for about 10 minutes at a time before having to move on to the next patient. Why is that? Because we have about 80 million people who are on Medicaid, and we have about 1.1 million physicians. It's just not enough physicians to meet the demand. And that requires them to have to cut down on how much time they can spend with you. I don't know about you, but I need more than 10 minutes with my doctor, particularly if I have a lot of questions or I want to know what I can do to get things done. So a lot of us are going to concierge medical services, which are outside of that, which are private and are expensive. So when you have a lot of people who can't afford it, then you're going to push the government healthcare, and then you put people on government healthcare, and then you don't have enough physicians. It becomes a huge, huge problem. But you would think in a world where there's so much information and where accessibility is so easy, you would think that there would be more informed voters. But how? How can they be informed? We used to have libraries. This generation doesn't have libraries that are as active as they were when we were younger. The Dewey Decimal System, remember that? I bet a lot of our Gen Zers will look at you like you're crazy if you ask that question. We used to be able to pull out the Encyclopedia Britannica and all that good stuff. We can go grab a Yellow Pages and start flipping through that to go find an expert. There were things that we can do. And I know you should be laughing if you're not laughing, because so if you're laughing right now, you should be. Because none of these options happen in any of these cases. Like, our young people are just not going that route. In most cases, our young girls are going straight to Google, and most importantly to social media. And unfortunately, Google has been seen to not necessarily be the best place to go, as well as social media. What you're getting is a lot of opinions rather than getting facts. They're getting their information also from their peers. And their peers are producing these little short videos. So they're also getting information through what you call shorts, or these 1-minute videos that happen to have less than maybe 1 or 2 data points. But either way, this is helping to shape our young people. They're using slides, like these 3 to 5 Instagram slides. We just kind of slide through, and each slide provides one data point to a very complex issue. I mean, quite frankly, the idea of critical thinking is just lost. And there are many who believe that you're thinking critically if you're just pulling together a bunch of different articles from different places. And these are often written to push people in their political agendas. And when you're a young voter and you don't have the history to fall back on, how do you accurately come to a conclusion without feeling like it's someone else's conclusion rather than your own? Well, I'm going to tell you exactly what's happening in my humble opinion and observation. And I'm also going to share with you how I believe older voters can effectively message to younger voters. But until then, we're going to take a quick break and we will be right back. You're listening to the Janelle King Show. I am Janelle King. This is Extra 106.3. We'll be right back.
What do you mean you're burnt out? So I'm like, do you have another job on the side? How can you be burnt out? You know? What I discovered is they were the impasse on the team and everybody was calling them to unload. They were burnt out because they were taking on everybody's stress and they were exhausted. They couldn't take it anymore and they just quit. And when I talked about this publicly, I had a 23-year-old come up to me in one of the companies and said, I do that. And so we have to recognize they are struggling in a changing, chaotic, crazy world right now where there's so much uncertainty in this world. Like the world is always uncertain, but my God, it's war and the country's at each other's throat and there's challenge and the global warming and it's just insane, these poor kids. And they have no outlet. They don't know how to deal with it. So it's a challenge for all of us, is how do we hold space for them? And the problem is they don't even recognize when we're doing the right thing for them. That's the hardest part.
Thank you so much for coming to the table. Thank you for listening to the Janelle King Show. I am Janelle King. This is Extra 106.3, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Janelle King Show. I am Janelle King. This is Extra 106.3, and this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. So welcome back to the table. So this show is dedicated to explaining why I believe traditional political messaging is not the winning message in this upcoming election cycle and how we must pay attention, particularly to our younger voters. So if you missed the first half of the show, don't worry. You can always go to YouTube and watch it right now on the video podcast, or you can wait until tomorrow morning to catch the encore episode right here on Extra 106.3, as well as we have podcasts that drop every single Tuesday where you can listen to the audio version of this show in its entirety on the podcast park on Extra 106.3 or wherever you get your podcast. So before I close this episode, I want to leave you with something, and I want to leave you with how I believe young voters reach a conclusion on matters that often requires personal historical knowledge or have so many articles all written to support a particular narrative that is often supporting the position of a political party. I believe that our young voters come to these conclusions emotionally. I don't mean that to be shady. I don't mean that to be dismissive. I don't mean that in a negative way. I just believe that it's pretty obvious that our young voters are a lot more emotional than us and that they are utilizing their emotions to come to conclusions when it comes to political issues, foreign policy, when it comes to a lot of different issues.
So it literally takes me, I leave here, I get on the train at 7:30 and I don't get home till 6:15 earliest. And then I don't have time to do anything. I want to shower, eat my dinner and go to sleep. I don't have time or energy to cook my dinner either. I don't have energy to work out. That's out the window. I'm so upset. Oh my God. Nothing to do with my job at all, but just the 9 to 5 schedule in general is crazy.
The offender. What's your dream job? Dream job? What? That doesn't even make sense to me. You think I want to work? You think I'm
Is this a prank? I tried calling friends, nobody's picking up, so I just am gonna dump this here. It's the middle of the day, I completely understand, but I just had a really harrowing experience at work. I have this one coworker who simply refuses to use the correct pronouns for me. I've called her out every time she misgenders me, and she just is resigned to not.
So there was an African proverb that came out, particularly it was revitalized during the 2020 rioting that we saw taking place, where it says that rioting is the voice of the unheard, where I happen happen to believe in 2024 that rioting is the voice of the misunderstood, that they're emotionally wound up because they feel like they're not being heard, they're not being understood. Because we absolutely hear you, but it just seems like maybe we're not understanding something, or we just flat out disagree, and then there's a misunderstanding happening on our younger side because they feel like somehow understanding is agreement, which is also emotional disconnect. I see so much emotion associated with everything that's connected to millennials and Gen Zers. We're emotional when we tweet, and whether we're angry, whether we're passionate. I see it in social media. There's a lot of emotion behind how our younger people write, how they feel. They talk a lot about how they feel. So that's something I'm seeing a lot. And many of us, particularly as millennials and Gen Zers, we come from homes where we were encouraged to place an emphasis or a high degree on or attention to our feelings, right? We would sit home, mom and dad are like, hey, how are you feeling today? What was your day like? There was a lot of that happening in our generation. So there was a huge emphasis on, your feelings and being and how you should feel. And look, being compassionate or inclusive of everyone, every person, religion, perspective, etc. It may be commendable to some people, but it's just not practical. And we have to tell the truth when it comes to that. It's just not something that you can practically do on a regular basis and think that it will work. But what is also not practical, or most importantly, sustainable, is a matching emotions with emotions. And what I see from older people or older generations is adults attacking young people. And I think that is extremely unsustainable. And I think it is really concerning when I see that. Or if it's happening vice versa, when I see a young person attacking an older person, it looks just as bad. All of that to me is just not sustainable for a strong society. There has to be a healthy balance of respect for each generation. Well, in the Bible, because I'm a believer, I like to go to the Bible. Ecclesiastes 1:9 says that there's nothing new under the sun. And I believe that, and that everything simply evolves with innovation. But at the core of who we are, we all want the same things. My husband always speaks about this. We can't lose the fact that everybody wants to make a good living, educate our children, and be safe. So how do we message? First, we have to listen and stop telling. We have to explain the problem and all the secret ways that we see progressives use their emotions to rile up their base while secretly working behind the scenes to do opposite of what young people think is best, because they know that their option or the emotional option is just not going to work. And we see this with the Israel and Hamas war. I mean, we see the Democrat Party saying things like, no, we're standing over here. They're trying to kind of straddle the fence, while behind the scenes, they're absolutely supporting this war because they understand what is at stake. And they understand that the emotional response is not sustainable, and it will lead us into a worst case scenario that we don't want, particularly here in America. So they are still working behind the scenes, supporting Israel, whether the young voters in their party likes it or not. However, they're not telling them. They're still spewing up emotions and doing all that stuff. So you have to identify the goal of these young people and show them how policy can help, or how they can get there faster by preserving these traditional values. And in some cases, it's not faster, but it's more sustainable. It would last a lot longer over time. There's a very cool show on Netflix that does this very well. It's called Black Mirror, and I really enjoy watching the show because it takes this great idea and then it shows how it can impact negatively over time. And I think we have to do something like that. We have to start by asking questions like how? How do you want to do this? How are you going to sustain it? How can this come into effect? How can you get so many people on board with your ideas? How do you get people to believe you and trust you? And then also follow it up with why. Why are you doing this? Why is this important? Why does this have to happen? And in most cases, the ideas has already been tested before, or these voters were just not alive when it happened, so they just don't know. They have no recall. So they have no idea, they have no means of looking back and saying, oh, this is already tested. So to them, it's a brand new idea. So we have to keep that in mind by having patience and understanding, while also being flexible to change. Because guess what? It's going to happen whether you like it or not. That's all that I have for today. And I thank you so much for watching. If you're on YouTube, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for coming to the table. Till next week, thank you for listening to the Janelle King Show. I am Janelle King. This is Extra 106.3, and we'll be right back next week.
Every 3 minutes, a person in the U.S. is diagnosed with a blood cancer like leukemia, lymphoma, or myeloma, blood cancers that often require patients to endure difficult treatments that leave them feeling weak, cold, and isolated. Subaru of Gwinnett is here to help. Since 2016, Subaru has partnered with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, a cause that FAN has been proud to support for over 24 years. And in the month of June, through our Subaru Loves to Care initiative, we're continuing our partnership with LLS to give even more to patients and their families. Subaru, more than a car company. Visit SubaruofGwinnett.com to learn more.
Are you planning a fall wedding? With a venue to book, cakes to taste, and decorations to pick, the expenses can stack up. This month, D. Geller & Son is taking one expense off your plate: the rings. How? For the month of August, D. Geller & Son is offering 0% APR financing for 5 years. Find the perfect match to her engagement ring or dream up something totally one of a kind. Surprise her with something that will take her breath away on your wedding day. And just the same, get 60 months to pay with no interest. Only at D. Geller & Son in Atlanta, Kennesaw, and Sandy Springs, and online at dgeller.com.
This morning in North Carolina, wheels are spinning. Determination is winning. A passion is now a thriving business, and it shows no signs of slowing down. How? The power of a conversation, like the one Clint Spiegel had with First Horizon Bank about starting a bike wheel manufacturing facility in Asheville. Now it's not just talk, it's rubber meets road. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/Clint. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.